It was early morning in the dry Savannah plains of Kenya, where the horizon stretched endlessly and the golden grass shimmered in the sun. The world was just waking up. The doves cooed softly, a distant river murmured, and the wind carried the scent of the wild. Miles away from the nearest village stood an old wildlife rehabilitation center, half forgotten and half alive. It was home to a woman named Clara Whitmore, a retired animal behaviorist from Montana who had moved to Africa 15 years ago after losing her husband. For her, the silence of the wild had become a kind of peace, the language of life that asked for nothing but understanding. Clara was in her early 60s now, her hair silver white, her hands weathered from years of nursing animals, orphaned elephants, injured zebras, abandoned cubs. She lived simply, in a wooden cabin surrounded by tall acacia trees, with only her old dog Rusty and the songs of the wild to keep her company. That morning, Clara was cleaning the water trough near the fence when Rusty began to growl, low, uncertain, not his usual warning bark. She followed his gaze toward the tree line. Out there in the distance, something was moving slowly through the tall grass. A lioness. Clara froze. The animal wasn't charging or stalking. She was walking carefully, almost limping, her head low, and something small dangled from her mouth. Clara squinted and then realized the lioness was carrying a cub. Her first instinct was caution. Wild lions never approached humans, and a mother with her cub was especially dangerous. But there was something strange. The lioness looked desperate, not aggressive. Her golden eyes seemed to be pleading. Rusty barked again, but Clara shushed him softly. "It's okay, boy, stay." The lioness stopped about 30 feet away from the fence. She placed the cub gently on the ground and took a step back, her tail twitching nervously. The cub let out a weak, pitiful cry, a sound Clara knew all too well. The little one was in pain. Clara could see from that distance that the cub's leg was twisted unnaturally, maybe broken. And then she noticed the blood. "Oh dear Lord," she whispered. Clara's heart pounded, but she could feel, in a way she couldn't explain, that the lioness wasn't here to harm her. She was here for something else, something she didn't understand yet. Years of experience told her to move slowly. She spoke aloud, not to the animal, but to the air between them, a calm, even voice. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm not going to hurt you." The lioness tilted her head as if listening. Clara slowly knelt near the fence, her palms open, showing she had no weapon. The lioness took one hesitant step forward, then another. Rusty whined but stayed put, trained well by years of patience, and then, in a moment that Clara would later remember for the rest of her life, the lioness pushed the cub forward, gently, with her nose, until it was just a few feet from the fence line. It was as if she was offering her baby. Clara's throat tightened. "You want me to help?" she whispered. The lioness stood there watching her with those wild amber eyes, fierce yet fragile. It was a gaze that didn't belong to an animal begging. It was a mother asking for help. Clara moved carefully to the gate. Her fingers trembled as she unlatched it, knowing one wrong move could be fatal. But the lioness didn't move. She simply waited. Once the gate opened, Clara crouched and inched forward, the dry grass brushing her knees. The cub tried to crawl but whimpered in pain. Clara could see the wound more clearly now, a deep cut near the leg, likely from a snare trap or thorny branch. "Poor little one," she murmured, her voice soft as the breeze. She picked up the cub gently, wrapping it in her scarf. The lioness tensed for a moment, then relaxed when Clara looked up and spoke softly again. "I'll fix her, I promise," as she turned back toward the cabin. The lioness didn't follow, she simply sat, her golden body still against the backdrop of green, watching, waiting. Inside, Clara worked with the focus of a surgeon and the heart of a mother. Years ago, she had done this countless times, dressing wounds, setting splints, feeding weak cubs. Her hands moved on instinct, cleaning the wound with antiseptic, bandaging it with gentle precision. The cub whimpered but didn't struggle. Maybe it sensed safety. Outside, through the window, the lioness paced back and forth, her tail flicking nervously. Rusty sat near the door, occasionally glancing at Clara as if to ask if this was really happening. Hours passed. The sun climbed high and then began to fall again. By afternoon, the cub was resting, its breathing calm. Clara sat beside it, stroking its fur gently. When she finally stepped outside, the lioness was still there, waiting exactly where she'd left her. Clara spoke again, her voice trembling with awe. "She's going to be okay. You can rest easy now." The lioness blinked slowly. Not fear, not threat, just something like relief. And then something even stranger happened. The lioness lay down just a few feet away from Clara, stretched her body on the grass and began to cry. Not a roar, not a growl, but a low trembling moan, like the sound of grief and gratitude mixed together. Clara had seen thousands of animals express pain, but never had she seen one express emotion this way. Her eyes filled with tears. "It's all right, Mama," she said softly, her voice breaking. "She's safe." The lioness closed her eyes as if she understood. For the next 2 nights the lioness stayed close, never far from the cabin. She didn't eat or hunt. She only watched, waiting until her cub could move again. Clara left bowls of water near the fence, and sometimes when the wind was still, she could hear the lioness's soft breathing under the moonlight. It was like living beside a spirit, wild, ancient and gentle. On the 3rd morning, the cub stirred and tried to stand. The bandage held. Clara smiled and whispered, "You're a strong little one." She carried the cub outside, heart pounding. The lioness was already there, as if she'd been waiting all along. When Clara set the cub on the grass, it wobbled, then hobbled toward its mother. Letting out a tiny cry, the lioness rose instantly, rushing forward with a deep, throaty rumble that echoed through the plain. She sniffed her baby, licked the bandaged leg, and then, in one swift, tender motion, nuzzled the cub against her chest. Clara stood frozen, tears streaking her face. She had witnessed love before, as in humans, in pets, even in grief, but this was different. This was pure instinct turned to trust. Before leaving, the lioness turned back once more. Their eyes met through the warm morning air, and in that gaze, Clara felt something unexplainable, a silent thank you that crossed the invisible line between human and wild. The lioness picked up her cub, disappearing into the tall grass, her golden fur blending with the sunlight until she was gone. Clara stood there for a long time, her hand on the gate, the wind brushing against her silver hair. She didn't speak. She didn't move, but deep in her heart she knew. That moment had changed her forever. Weeks passed. The Savannah shifted from gold to grey, the dry season tightening its grip on the land. Days were hotter, winds harsher. But in Clara Whitmore's heart, something had quietly changed since that morning. The morning a lioness had walked out of the wilderness and placed her cub at a human's feet. The memory stayed with her. Every night she would sit on the porch, a cup of tea in her trembling hands, eyes fixed on the horizon where the lioness had vanished. Rusty would lie beside her, ears twitching whenever the wind carried a distant roar. "Do you think she's out there, boy?" Clara would whisper. "Do you think she remembers?" Rusty never answered, of course, but sometimes his tail wagged, as if he knew. A month later, something unusual began happening near the edge of her property. At first, Clara noticed the zebra herd grazing closer to the fence, something they never did. Then she found fresh paw prints by the water trough one dawn. Large, deep, unmistakable. A lion had been there. She should have been frightened. A woman living alone, unarmed, surrounded by wilderness. But she wasn't. In her bones she felt no danger, just curiosity. That night she left the lantern burning outside her porch. A small signal, a flicker of trust. And at dawn, when she stepped outside with her morning tea, she saw her again, the lioness, standing in the pale light, tall and radiant as the sun rose behind her. The cub, now stronger, walked proudly by her side, its limp almost gone. Clara gasped softly, her heart swelling. "Well, look who's come back," she whispered. The lioness didn't move closer this time. She stood at a respectful distance, her eyes calm, her body relaxed. The cub stared curiously at the woman who had once touched its wounds. Clara felt tears rise to her eyes. She didn't dare move too quickly. Instead, she spoke gently into the wind, her voice barely above a breath. "You're safe here, both of you. I kept my promise, didn't I?" The lioness lowered her head, not submission, but acknowledgement. Then something miraculous happened. She began to walk slowly toward the fence again, not with fear or caution, but with quiet confidence. She reached the same spot as before, where her cub had once lain bleeding, and she sat, the cub nuzzled against her chest, then rolled playfully on the grass, mewing softly. Clara knelt down near the fence, her hands pressed against the wood. "You trust me still, after all this time?" The lioness's tail flicked once and she blinked, slow and deliberate. In animal language, that was the closest thing to a smile. For hours they stayed like that, a woman and a lioness sharing silence. Clara talked quietly about her late husband, about how they had always dreamed of living near animals, about how she never thought she'd have the courage to stay after he passed. "I thought I was alone," she said softly. "But you showed me I never really was." The lioness tilted her head, her ears twitching as if listening. For Clara, that moment healed something deeper than grief. It was as if the wild itself had spoken back to her, assuring her that compassion had no boundary, not of species, not of language, not even of fear. The next few weeks became something like a rhythm, an unspoken friendship between two mothers. Every few days, the lioness would appear with her cub, resting near the fence while Clara refilled the water or tended to her garden. Rusty eventually stopped growling. He would sit nearby, his tail thumping lazily, as if accepting the new visitors as family. Clara never tried to feed the lioness or tame her. She knew better than to take away the wildness that made her beautiful. All she offered was presence, a silent companionship built on respect. And then one morning the pattern broke. The lioness didn't come. Nor the next day. By the third, Clara felt something was wrong. She checked for tracks. None. The grass near the fence was undisturbed. The savannah was too quiet. Even the birds seemed to have gone still. Her chest tightened with dread. "No, not again," she murmured. Days passed. A week. 2. Still no sign. Clara tried to convince herself that perhaps the lioness had moved with the herd migration, or gone hunting farther away. But something deep inside told her otherwise. That quiet ache of intuition that only comes to those who have loved and lost before. Then one stormy night, just as the thunder rolled across the plain, Rusty began barking, not out of fear, but urgency. Clara grabbed her lantern and stepped into the rain. The wind whipped her hair, the grass bending in waves. And then through the downpour she saw movement. 2 glowing eyes. The lioness, but she was alone. She was limping heavily, her fur darkened with mud and blood. She stumbled near the same spot by the fence and collapsed with a heavy thud. Clara's heart dropped. She ran forward without thinking, shouting over the storm, "I'm here! I'm here!" The lioness raised her head weakly, eyes full of pain, yet still calm, still trusting. Clara knelt just inside the fence, rain streaming down her face, her trembling hands reaching through the gaps. "What happened to you?" The lioness exhaled slowly, a deep rumble that was more breath than sound. Her sides heaved. Exhaustion, not aggression. Clara knew she couldn't treat her this time. The lioness was too big, too wild, too wounded. All she could do was stay beside her, so she did. She sat there for hours in the rain, talking softly, telling her she wasn't alone. Rusty lay at her feet, shivering but silent. As dawn broke, the storm faded into a soft drizzle. The lioness's breathing slowed. Her body relaxed. She turned her head slightly toward Clara, and with one final shuddering breath she was still. Clara pressed her hand against the fence, her tears mixing with the rain. "You came back to say goodbye." The cub never returned, but Clara knew it had survived, the way children of the wild always do. She liked to think the lioness had found peace in knowing that. Months later, tourists and rangers passing through the plains would sometimes see a young lion resting near a certain cluster of acacia trees, strong, graceful with one faint scar on its leg, and near that same place they noticed an old wooden cabin, its fence still standing, and a woman often sitting on her porch, staring at the horizon with a faint smile. When asked what she was looking at, she would always say, "Oh, nothing really. Just an old friend." Years later, long after Clara passed away, the rehabilitation center was closed and reclaimed by the wild. Nature grew over the fences, and the land returned to silence. But those who trekked far enough into the savannah sometimes spoke of a strange sight, a lioness and her cub resting near an old tree stump, calm and unbothered by the presence of humans. No one could explain it. But those who believed, the ones who understood that kindness echoes longer than any roar, would simply nod and whisper. Clara kept her promise.